Today is April 3rd, 2008. My name is Judy Showalter, and I'm here with John Vaughn from the class of 1966 for the Living Legacies Oral History Project for Randolph-Macon College. Lori Preston and Sarah Hendricks are also here with us today. Thank you for coming, Mr. Vaughn, and sharing some of your memories with us. Can you tell us how you first heard of Randolph-Macon College?
I think, reflecting back, I had a high school classmate of mine who applied here at Randolph-Macon, as well as my father had been here for a district conference meeting for the Methodist Church. And so he had been to campus and was favorably impressed. And at the time that I was considering colleges, I had an older brother at the University of Virginia, and I decided I didn't want to go there. So discussing with my guidance counselors at the high school, I thought Randolph-Macon would be a good choice, given that it was far enough away from home, not too far, but far enough, and that it was a small town atmosphere, and I grew up in a small town, and that the college was well respected, college, great reputation. And so I applied, and we came down for a brief Sunday visit after I was accepted, and at that point then I decided to come here.
Can you tell us what your impressions of the school were on that first brief visit? Does anything stand out?
I think my first impression was the history of the architecture and the stateliness of the campus. And its ties to the railroad. And I say that because I grew up in the small town that I grew up in. The railroad passed right through the center of the little town. And so it really felt like home because it was a very predominant common element to Ashland, Randolph-Macon, and to the town that I grew up in, and that was the railroad. And the sound of the train and the movement of the train and what the train meant in terms of travel and just trains. So my overall impression was, again, I don't know, stateliness is maybe not the right word, but the comfortness of the campus and the ability to sit under a tree and to wander around and to have a sense of a smallness, but at the same time a largeness. The train represented a huge largeness in its opportunity to travel and to move beyond.
How did you afford a Randolph-Macon education? Did you have a scholarship?
Well, I'm one of 6 children, and 5 of us were in college at the same time, and this is 1960s. As I mentioned, my older brother was at the University of Virginia, and my younger sister was planning to go to Radford. And so for myself and my family, the college education expense was a major factor, or a factor in our family situation. Strangely enough, my father's view about expenses on college was that there was not a huge difference between Randolph-Macon as a private college and Virginia's public college, such as the University of Virginia. At that time, I realize things have changed, but at that time, in the mid-60s, his view was that they were more on par than perhaps what they are today. So how we financed my college education was that I worked during the summertime when I was in high school and saved money, and my mother operated a very small grocery store, a rural grocery store in our town, and we worked there after school and on summer. After high school, I worked to earn more money, different job opportunities, and saved that, as well as when I graduated from James River High School. I was awarded a local scholarship of $200, and at that time Randolph-Macon's tuition, I believe, was slightly less tuition and board and meals, everything in total bill, more or less, than as I recall, was slightly more than $3,000 a year. Not much more, but around $3,000. So with my savings and my working after school and the scholarship, I was able to the first year to handle it. It was a stretch. Frankly, it was a stretch for all of us, family as well as myself. There were no cars to drive and no cell phones. Tight budget. My second year at Randolph-Macon, I received a scholarship from the college. It was a scholarship of $300 for the year, $150 per semester. We were on semesters then. And I also received a follow-up scholarship from the same community program that I'd received a year earlier of $200. So, and by working in the summers, that went a long ways to the tuition. Interesting enough, I was looking at some of the scholarship correspondence that I'd received from the college, and there's a little note from the scholarship committee of my stipend would be $150, and some of this may be interesting for your archives. And another note that I'd gotten from the business in the community that awarded the scholarships at James River High School. And also interesting enough, my father worked in Roanoke at a business that had a board of directors, and Mr. Arminstead, who was on the board of trustees at Randolph-Macon at the time, and he was the president of the Roanoke Times at that time, had written a letter of recommendation to Dr. Moreland recommending me for a scholarship. And Dr. Moreland, I have a copy of the letter that he wrote back in response to that, which I'll make available. It may be of interest to you, just a correspondence of a trustee and Dr. Moreland. So I was fortunate enough to have been the recipient of scholarships and recommendations by very kind people, and that were very giving, not only of their resources, but very giving of their time and interest in my success. And so in that regard, I was the benefit of scholarships and recommendations and generosity of people and businesses.
What was it like when you arrived as a freshman? Which dorm were you in? And
well, Rival was everything started, I believe, in one day back then, as I kind of recall. My parents drove me down with the stuff, and I was in Thomas Branch, and I kind of recall that most parents were doing the same thing. It was a Sunday, and everybody was arriving for a Monday, quote, start, where you signed in as a student, and picked up your fish hat and got the more or less the lay of the land and orientation. It was a week of orientation is what it was. And so all freshmen were down for that. And I was, my dorm was Thomas Branch. In the front, and actually it was right across from the Methodist church there on the corner. So it was a nice corner view. So I got the church bells and the fraternity house exposure through, depending on which window we opened.
tell us about the fish hat.
Well, the fish hat was something we wore, or it was part of the orientation, and I'm trying to think how long we did wear it. I don't know whether we wore it for a whole semester or not. But it was a way of identifying a new person.
One of the reasons I ask is we're getting different stories on how long you wore them. And did you wear them for the first semester, or did you wear them the full semester unless we beat Hampton-Sydney? They're saying if we beat Hampton-Sydney, you got to take them off.
That may be correct. But the game was typically in November, so you were
Saved your week.
And we had exams after the first semester, so you may have been saved a month or a month and a half of wearing the fish hat. There was also a little badge. Yeah. I think there was a little badge. I kind of remember something about a little badge and a fish hat, just as, and I think that was a name tag kind of thing. But the fish hat was, again, a way of identifying us as, I wanted to say, fair bait. The new people, the newies on campus were fair bait for the older class members to occasionally harass, and in a friendly way. One of the things I remembered, and typically these activities happened in the evening after cover of dark. We'd be gathered up from the dorms and encouraged to come over to the football field and sing. And one of the songs we had to sing was Dixie, and I thought, I didn't even know the words to Dixie. So anyway, it was a way, I guess, of trying to get a group of new people cemented it and focused on their their common hatred of, or not hatred, but their common anxiety, and make a cohesiveness of a group. I don't think anything untoward really happened out of it. It was more of an inconvenience than anything else, as I recall.
Tell us about your relationships on campus. Who was your roommate?
My first roommate was a fellow from Northern Virginia. His name was John Eby. He also was a chem major. We were both chem majors. And he went on to be to MCV, School of Pharmacology, I think. Became a pharmacist. So he departed Randolph-Macon after his second year, I think, and went on then to MCV, as I recall. So we kind of lost touch, that he remained a chem major, and I moved after my second year away from chemistry into economics. So had different paths at that point. Other roommate was second year roommate was a fellow by the name of Lanny Whitehouse, and he was from the Lynchburg area, I believe. We lived out in the motel dorms then, and then I had another roommate my senior year. My roommate was a young man from the up in Shenandoah Valley area named Michael Forbes. And I believe he was a junior, so we were senior junior at that point. So after leaving college, he was remaining in college, and I'd gone on to full-time working. So we kind of lost touch in that regard. Other folks along the way, I've met people that, surprisingly enough, that after 25 years or so, that we correspond occasionally by email, and but most of the friends that I had in college are pretty widespread. They live. One of them is actually a professor out at the University of Las Vegas, and another friend is down in Georgia, in social services in the state of Georgia. So that people have gotten widespread, and I think that was fairly common in my class. I want to say people really moved out and got pretty far away from where they grew up, perhaps where they lived, and even, as I say, where they went to school. It was a period of time of moving away, I want to say. Opportunities were better, seemingly, at a distance.
You mentioned you changed your major.
Mm-hmm.
How did you decide on your major, and who were the faculty members that influenced that?
I started originally as a chem major with Dr. Boldridge was my advisor, and I continued on with chemistry through my second year with Dr. Updike and organic chemistry. Then I took as a social science a course in economics, an introductory course, and I began to see the interest that I had in the more business and the management side uh, was more interesting to me. I enjoyed chemistry, but quite frankly, as I started to look at a career, I looked at a career that was oriented to lab work as opposed to a career that was oriented in a business world. And on that basis, I felt that a minor in chemistry and a major in economics, marrying the two, gave me a science discipline, but a broad business career path. And my economics professor was Dr. Baskin, a really great professor. I was a student assistant to him, and taught one of the labs my senior year. That was one of the jobs I had on campus in terms of financial support. So that my senior year I was taught statistics lab. And other professors, Dr. Boldridge was very encouraging in the change of majors. It wasn't like that I was abandoning chemistry at all. He was very encouraging, and I enjoyed the chemistry in the lab. Randolph-Macon at that time, and still does, had a very good pre-med program, and the chemistry majors and biology majors and physics majors, that people that went through those programs got a very good grounding as pre-med, and then went on to MCV and other med schools. So, and I met some nice people in the chem side.
I'm curious about a statistics lab.
Mm-hmm.
We, as far as I know, don't teach with the idea of labs in business anymore. Was it just a study session, or?
Well, interesting enough that you would mention that. Actually, what the lab was using a very primitive calculator in statistical analysis. And this calculator was a manual calculator that you turn the handle on, and as it did your calculation statistically, you would move this, for lack of a better word, ledger along the decimal points as you were moving the handle, and it would perform a mechanical wheel calculation for you. Very, very primitive, but not as primitive as an abacus board, but it was a mechanical device. It was pre-calculator, pre-electronic type of thing. And when you would do statistical analysis and calculating numbers to the nth degree out, it was used for that purpose.
What about non-academic activities? Did you participate in any extracurricular activities?
Yeah, we on campus there was a group of social association called Independence at that point, and it was a club. It wasn't a fraternity, but it functioned that way. Not without a house, but it had social functions on the weekends, and we would have social parties. That's what they were, parties. And we'd have bands, and a band would come in, and you and your date. I mean, my date would come, and we'd have parties at typically at not having a house. I remember some of them were actually in the the old cafeteria. We would have a room. We could rent a room, and the band would set up in there, and we'd use that. And weekend dates would come down, and my date would stay at a house in town. People would, for $5 or $10 a night, they would have a room that your date could stay in, and there was no co-ed dorms then for any purpose, and so your date had to be off campus and go up Mary Washington and get them in the car and drive down, or Mary Baldwin. So it was too much to drive back and forth. So basically, they'd spend the weekend, especially the football game, and stay over Saturday night and go back on Sunday. And the Independence was a group that allowed that party function and socialization without actually being a member of a fraternity. And of course, there were no sororities on campus. There were the only, as I recall, the only female students were day students. Yeah. I had some day students in class, but there were no resident. It was purely all men's college at that time.
You mentioned before we started the dress code.
Yeah.
And how that changed. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, when I started here in 1962, the dress code was coat and tie, as I recall, in all classes. Over the next 4 years, that gradually changed to be relaxed, and I think the first sign of the change was it was at the professor's option, and some professors, dropped the requirement of the coat and tie. Some would say, well, I'd like for you to have a tie on but no coat. And later on, I guess maybe in my second year, or certainly by the third year, if it were any required a coat and tie, then you could have on shorts or you could have on sandals, but from the waist up, you had the coat and tie on. The only, and it may be a function of the type of class you were in. I think English classes tended to be more coat and tie affairs, English lit and those. The sciences, especially labs, I'm sure the dress code relaxed with over time with that too, because of just being in a lab with a coat and tie on. But certainly for that first year, it was everything pretty much on campus was a coat and tie affair, but relaxed over time as we went through time, and in as I moved into my senior year, from my junior to the senior year, there were significant changes on campus, and we were in the middle of the 1960s, and there was significant change on a lot of college campuses, and Randolph-Macon was no exception.
And that was the next thing I was going to ask is, what was it like being on campus during the
well,
I don't know what word to use, 60s?
Social unrest.
Well, social unrest, or occasionally I've heard it termed the turbulent 60s. Interesting enough, I have a perspective of that, which I'll share. And I'll also share briefly a comment that Dr. Oliver, George Oliver, mentioned when I was chatting with him at a social occasion here on campus last year. First, my impression. The 60s, especially as we 64, late 64, 65, 66, in that year and a half, I guess, we as a student body wanted what we perceived as more flexibility, and we termed it more freedoms to do things on campus, and to some of the restrictions be relaxed. The coat and tie, the dress code may have been one of those things. Compulsory attendance to chapel may have been another. And kind of each person kind of had their own view of what, quote, their sense of freedom and their sense of relaxing of rules and the communication, the openness of communication with the administration or of the college administration could be improved. I was just looking at an old yellow jacket, and for some reason this is the only one that I've kept, and it was dated in May of '65, and the headline is "Protesters March on Lawson Campus Fever Pitches Climb." So, and there was a little article about the Ashland police were not pleased with the students blocking the streets. We quote, organized our sense of protest by sitting in some of the streets on a warm May evening. Well, we didn't sit in the streets very long because the local Ashland police, and as well as campus police and other administration, encouraged us to get out of the public street and to talk on the sidewalks, and so that didn't last too long. And it was at the end of the year too, so there was a summer coming up, and I think everybody was glad for a little breathing room. I saw it as a time of change. The American society was in change, and the college was changing, socially changing, and that was being brought to bear, and out of it is the college we have today. I think, interesting enough, looking back on it now, 40 years later, I'm just kind of giving my perspective. I thought it was, kind of a spring fling or spring activity where students, and preparing for exams, just letting off some steam kind of thing. Well, let's just go sit in the street, no big deal, Well, from a different perspective, which Dr. Oliver shared, from his perspective and the administration's perspective, was that there was a very serious concern on the part of the administration and faculty that they were losing control, and that their fear was that some of the students would lose self-control to the point that they would burn down the campus and occupy and try to destroy, as happened in several major campuses across the country, where buildings were occupied and things were destroyed and fires were set. And he recalled that during this period that members of the faculty and so forth would sit up all night on campus to be there to engage any activity that was a threat to the campus. So it was a completely different perspective. Whereas I was seeing it as a harmless thing. The other perspective, it was a very serious matter, and treated as such from individual professors sitting out or up or on watch all night long. Obviously, at the end of the day, their responsibility was to the student, and that no harm would be done. So, kind of, like I say, it was a turbulent time. Different perspectives, different people had different I don't want to say goals or objectives. They had different aims as what they wanted to accomplish.
And were those aims accomplished, do you think? Was the dress code changed?
I think the fact that the college has grown and is more successful is demonstration that the dialogue, and I think it was a communication dialogue at the end of the day, that was wanting to be opened, and a better understanding on the part of the student and the part of the administration, each other's perspective and position and motives and so forth. Communication was opened and improved, was accomplished. And I think at the end of the day, that was the root of the problem. And the way to solve the problem was better communication.
And who was the administration? Who were
At that time, everything has a focus, and so at that time, unfortunately, it was focused towards the dean of the school.
Who was?
Doug Lawson. And Dr. Moreland obviously was the president then. And just briefly, you can see the page, the Yellow Jacket, and some of the things that came out of it right away were that there was a presidential forum at which Dr. Moreland and Dean Lawson freely answered the questions of students in a give and take discussion. Sharing, here again, communicating and sharing each other's perspective. So I think when we came back in the fall in '66, this was behind us and it moved on. Not that society as such outside of the college, because again, '66 was turbulent years too in a lot of campuses around the country. But I don't recall that level of spiritual activism in terms of sitting in the streets and those things. That was over, and the communication had started.
How about after graduation? What did you do with your life?
Oh, okay. It's easier. I took a job. Well, let me back up a little bit. Dr. Baskin had a class that was focused on the Federal Reserve System, its founding and so forth. And it was called an overview of the Federal Reserve System. And one of those aspects of that class was a tour of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond, which is in the 5th District. It covers 5 states or so. And so we went on a tour, the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. Dr. Baskin, if any of you knew him, was a very outgoing person and a very congenial person, easy to get along with, and he knew the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond. So at the end of our tour, he popped his head into their office, and we were all invited in to the president's office and sat down and just had a little informal talk. So that was kind of I thought, well, this is a neat place here. So I applied for a job there, and I got one. And I went to work for the Federal Reserve Bank of Richmond when I completed college. And I worked there. It was a brief 2 years out to be in the Army, returning there, and I worked there to 1978 in various capacities. 1978, I joined Philip Morris in New York City, and I moved to New York City and lived there and worked with Philip Morris in New York for about 6 years. And then I returned to Richmond and a part of their international group, and was involved in international projects for the next 20 years, and had having a lucky spot of working in a wonderful company and great opportunity to travel and live in various parts of the world, in basically overseeing and planning and designing construction facilities, manufacturing facilities, office buildings, and things like that. So my background, even though it's been in economics, it started out in economics, but ended up in being project management, the management of projects.
How did you stay in touch with Randolph-Macon over the years?
Primarily through the president's, not association, wrong word. Society, yeah. President's Society, yeah. And I contributed to that and kept up that way. And some friends' children also attended Randolph-Macon, and so I would occasionally come to college and visit with them, and so kept some connection that way. But it was somewhat of a distant relationship. I wasn't present in the country a lot of the times, and so I didn't have a chance to really participate on an ongoing basis.
You have set up a scholarship here at Randolph-Macon.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us what inspired you to do that and who it is for?
The scholarship is a memorial scholarship named after my parents, James and Mary Vaughn. And I wanted to establish something here at the college that would honor them as well as be a memorial to them. I think that they sacrificed a significant, huge sacrifice and on their part, not only for myself but for my brothers and sisters too. And I wanted to honor that and memorialize that. And I wanted to, at the same time, to direct that scholarship activity focus back to the community in which they grew up and lived in, as well as my brothers and sisters and I did. And so it's directed to seniors at James River High School in Botetourt County are the prime recipients. It's been the program started, and we have 2 young men here now. Both will be rising juniors next year. And so the purpose of my scholarship was to honor my parents, and at the same time recognize that I received help along the way from a lot of people, and in paying back some rent in terms of giving back to the community, deserving individuals, but also trying to build that relationship with Randolph-Macon so that opportunities exist for low-income individuals who have the ability and the desire to attend a small college such as Randolph-Macon. And trying to, again, build a relationship, a bridge between a rural community, rural environment community, and the college.
Those are all my questions. Is
Oh,
there
okay.
anything that I skipped that you would like to share with us? Any thoughts about the school?
I participated and sat in on the expansion, some of the long-range expansion, strategic development plans for the college, and I think they're very exciting. My background, and I guess my not only my background, but somewhat my experiences in life have taught me that flexibility in things is not only oneself, but in the design of and planning of growth is important, and I see that in the plan, that there's flexibility in the arrangement and expansion of the college, and I think by allowing flexibility, we can best accommodate the unknowns of the future, and I think that's one of the secrets of Randolph-Macon and its success is being able to accommodate an ever-changing future. It will always be different, and we can plan for change, but in the end, we have to be flexible for the unknown. And I think the college has done a good job of that.
Do you have any stories, any other memories that you want to get on the record?
No, other than attending Randolph-Macon was a life-changing experience for me. And it offered me the advantage of, in a somewhat, at my pace, the movement from a rural society to a world society. And it offered me the opportunity to do that at my pace. And I think that's one of the treasures that the college offers individuals, is the ability to make that move and to offer a life-changing event and opportunity. And it's my goal and my desire that the scholarship program is a factor in helping that. So,
Thank you very much.
well, you're welcome. Okay.
Okay.
We can do an addendum here.
If you want to repeat the question, Judy, just.
Repeat the question.
Oh, well, the question was talking about the administration's communications with the student or lack thereof. I asked Mr. Vaughn what the specific communications were about, like the world's changes, for example, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and JFK's assassination and the all of the things that were leading up to the Vietnam War, including I think Diem was killed in '63 as well. So all during that time, major world changes.
As I recall, the Cuban Missile Crisis, when that was announced, or during that time, our form of getting information was the newspaper, radio news, and I think there was a TV in the lounge. No individual TVs in rooms. There was a TV in a central lounge. And so the news media as such was communicated through your own little individual radio, or you watched the TV, or you read the newspaper. I don't recall any chapel assemblies called to discuss that period of time or leading up to the Kennedy's declaration that the missiles had to be removed and so forth, other than its general news. And when it was, I recall hearing it on the radio when the President Kennedy gave the speech, that and the photographs and so forth that were shown, and that it had to be removed in the time period and so forth, that the ships would have to turn around. But I don't recall anything specific from the administration other than just general news. There were no breaks, nothing like that. It wasn't perceived that we were going to have an atomic attack. So there was no disruption or in the classes that I'm aware of. When Kennedy was shot, it was, again, the form of communication was the radio and TV, and natural classes were suspended. They were suspended for, I think it was a Friday, so for 2 days, I believe. And we had some chapel. There was chapel and so forth. It was during that period of time scheduled. But I don't recall, I didn't go home, so I don't recall that you were asked to leave the campus. You basically stayed on campus and participated either in a memorial service or observations, memorial service, and watched the ceremonies on the TV and things like that. But the school was not dismissed. So those were two significant events. But again, I recall the basic information was general news. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. We were remembering about calculators and computers and how things have changed since I was here in Randolph-Macon in the mid-'60s. I remember that the first computer the college had was an IBM computer, and you could take a class and use the computer. The computer was in the basement of Mary Branch, and all entry was by punch cards. And you would have to write your program, your software program, and outline it, and then convert all of that into machine language, was the software, and then you had to then convert that into punches on a punch card, and then you could then load the punch cards into the computer, and that's how calculations were performed. but I believe that was Groves, Dr. Groves or Graves.
I'll have to look that up.
That was in charge of that computer, and there was limited time that you could use it, and you'd be scheduled like half an hour time, and generally it was in the evenings, but only certain classes could use it based on their need for the computer resource. So it was a very valuable resource as a teaching tool, but it was a very limited resource in that it was not available to widespread use. It had to be use specific and directed to either your class or a program you were doing for accounting or function like that. It was a huge machine.
They were big. I think that punch card is so foreign to today's students, and my sister is a computer type who started with the IBM with punch cards, and she's, you know, what her big memory of Randolph-Macon is, you didn't want to get anybody mad at you in the computer area because they'd take one of your cards.
Yeah, it was the punch cards were very sensitive, and you couldn't warp them, you couldn't get them wet, and you could have one punch out of sequence, and your whole program would go nowhere. So it was very, very tedious exercise and very time-consuming, and compared to today's computers and handheld calculators.